He was rocking forward, digging the sounds. Igor on chains, backed by his baying hounds. The coffin bangers were about to arrive when the vocal group, the Crypt Kicker Five,
They played the mash.
they played the Monster Mash.
The monster mash.
It was a graveyard
They
smash.
played the mash.
It caught on in a
They
flash.
played the mash.
They played the Monster Mash. Out from his coffin, Drax's voice to ring. Seems he was troubled by just one thing. He opened the lid and shook his fist and said, "Whatever happened to my Transylvania twist?"
It's now the mash.
It's now the Monster
The
Mash.
monster mash.
And it's a graveyard smash.
It's now the mash.
It caught on in a flash.
It's now the mash.
It's now the Monster Mash. Now everything's cool. Drax a part of the band. And my Monster Mash, a hit of the land. For you, the living, this mash was meant to. When you get to my door, just tell them boys sent you.
Then you can mash.
Then you can Monster
The
Mash.
monster mash.
It was a graveyard
Then
smash.
you can mash.
You'll catch on in a
Then
flash.
you can mash.
Then you can Monster Mash.
Monster mash. Monster mash.
Get back on.
Monster mash. Monster mash.
If there's something strange in your neighborhood, who you gonna call? Ghostbusters! If there's something weird and it don't look good, who you gonna call? Ghostbusters! I ain't afraid of no ghosts. I ain't afraid of no ghosts. If you're seeing things running through your head, who you gonna call? Ghostbusters! An invisible man sleeping in your bed. Who you gonna call? Ghostbusters! I ain't afraid of no ghosts. I ain't afraid of no ghosts.
All right, you guys, are you a cat today? Are you a happy cat, a sad ghost, an excited crow, an angry jack-o'-lantern, or a scared ghost? You might be a combination of some of them. Drop it in the chat. A jack-o'-lantern, Thomas. Ooh. You need to come to my house. I got chili and apple dip and candy. Chocolate cures everything. Okay, so Dr. Lavillier definitely wins the costume contest. You look awesome.
I'm still at work, so this was today's get up.
I love it. I love it. Brett's got some black cat vibes. Same cat. Yep. Yep, good. Lots of stuff going on. So we got some people coming in, and a few people reached out to me and let me know that they would be a little bit late. They are kind of juggling some after school duties and things like that. And based on that, I'm actually going to let Dr. DeVilliers make the announcement about the workday. So if you could just kick that off, Dr. DeVilliers, kind of remind people about that and what it the expectations are, I'd appreciate it.
Yep. So everybody should have received an email, I hope. Everybody's got the agenda. Thumbs up. Okay. So we will meet Thursday. Hopefully everybody put in ASOP or Frontline as it's called now. People still call it ASOP, but Frontline, it should have been approved through your principal, and then it went to the district level. So you should have an approval for that day, and the substitute is being paid by the district. So you should have a subs lined up for Thursday. Thursday is going to be a work day for you. We're not going to have class Thursday night like we normally do. And so what I have been asked to do is kind of plug in what we would have done on a couple of the Thursday nights. And so I'm going to do just a little a kickoff at the very beginning in the morning. And then when we come back from lunch, I'll do another little quick session, just like we've been doing on Thursday nights, where I'm just kind of give you some ideas on some things that you can take to your classroom the very next day. We'll be working on breakout. If you're not familiar with breakout boxes, we'll talk about that a little bit. Really cool and fun. And then when we come back from lunch, we'll talk about flip and how flip can be used in your classroom as well. The rest of the day is pretty much for you. So you will be able to catch up on assignments from 7A. And if you're caught up, or if you want to work on 7B and this course, obviously, that's a good thing as well. And then don't forget Dr. Benoit. I don't know if that's still the case, but you said you're going to spend part of the morning. So that's an opportunity for you to really get with her, and any questions that you might have with her, you can talk to her face to face.
Absolutely. I will be there from 8 to 10 for sure. Maybe a little bit more, but Dr. Oj will also be present. Dr. Harvey is planning to be there. I'm trying to remember, there's quite a few of the McNeese professors are kind of rearranging some of their schedules so that they can be present with you. So even some of your professors that you may have had from 7A, we plan to be there at least for part of the day to be able to support you and ask some questions one-on-one. So if you have work samples that you need us to kind of look at and give guidance on, we will be right there. We're gonna bring our own work, and so we'll all be working together, at least for the morning portion. I know that. I think it's just really incredible. I'm really thankful that the district has provided this time for you and paid for subs. And I think it says a lot about how much they believe in the quality of the work that you're already producing and what the value you're already contributing to your school, that they want to continue investing in you. So we at the McNeese Burton College of Education, we have all been very impressed with your stamina, with how hard you're working, with what we, not only the quality of the work, but just the level of participation and engagement. Because we all were in the P12 world ourselves, some of us very recently, and we know that you are very busy every day, day to day. So we hear and understand it, and the district apparently does too, because they've carved out some time that I know is necessary for you. So good job. Thank you very much. And thank you, Dr. DeVilliers, for facilitating this for all of us.
And also, I wanted to add logistically, when you come, you may want to continue to park on the 7th Street side. We will start at the same place that we were here the last time we met at LCB, if everybody remembers, in that nice room that's kind of set up for us. We will start there. Depending on how many people are here, and with our extra visitors, what I thought we might do is, once we do kind of the whole group setup, the elementary group could stay in one location, and the middle and the high school group could go to another location, if they want to do that. So I'll have some space available for some flexibility if we want to kind of move around a little bit. But we will start in that one location. It's the old choir room that we turned into a conference room. So If you remember last Thursday or 2 weeks ago, that's where we'll be.
That used to be my classroom.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yep.
cool.
I know. No, I didn't
Cool.
teach choir. It's a very long story, but yes, yes, it was. It was an very old classroom. So all right, great. Just to kind of recap, Monday 10:30, that teaching cycle with pre-assessment was due, but we had talked about last time that if you felt that there were some areas that you needed a little bit more support for, that we would look at that on Thursday when we all have time to be together and troubleshoot some of those areas. And that would give you a little bit more support before you had to turn that in. So don't worry if you're like, man, I did everything I could. I need a second eye on a few things before I can submit it. We will be able to have that time on Thursday. So, all right, before we jump in, does anybody have any questions or pressing concerns or needs? Anything? Okay, it might roll around and that's good. So today we are already in module 4, which means that we're actually like beyond the halfway mark. And today we're going to be going over language structures, literacy knowledge, and verbal reasoning. And we're also going to look at the second part of the lesson plan. And you have 2 observation hours / field experience hours. 1 hour is already built into the lesson plan itself in the planning of that. And so you are just responsible for getting 1 additional hour. You can either use the curated videos, or if you have a mentor that you're using on your campus, and maybe you're doing like sitting in on one of their classes during a planning period, you can use that as well. So I leave that up to you. And once again, every single module, I put the observation field experience assignment. So it's built into every module, and you can check that out if you need it. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to pull up yeah, it's already good. It's ready to go. I am going to review our content for today. We are actually looking at those 3 strands. So if you will remember, this is that image that I really want you to get in your head for this course. Last week we talked about vocabulary knowledge and background knowledge, and today we're going to move on to verbal reasoning, literacy knowledge, and language structures. So you can see here in this particular, it's at the top, that top strand. And language structures have to do with syntax and semantics, verbal reasoning, inference, metaphor, other types of comparisons like drawing, conclusions. And then literacy knowledge is actually like the print concepts, the way that some of our different content areas are set up. So just a basic overview of language structures is that good language comprehension also requires an awareness of and a skill with syntax. So let me just enlarge this a bit. A little bit small for me and probably for y'all as well. Oh shoot, I hit start from beginning. It's okay, I'm not too far. So language structures definitely have to do with syntax, how the rules that determine how sentences are structured. And syntax awareness refers to the ability to monitor the relationships among the words in a sentence. So to kind of figure out how the words are working together. The reason that this matters in all of our content area is because poor syntactic awareness negatively impacts our overall comprehension. So again, in a really strong, effective instruction, we know that we're trying to meet all of those learning styles. We're trying to meet, of course, our visual learners, but we're also trying to kind of fill in some of the gaps that our learners may have in their ability to decode and understand text. Text, of course, is going to be presented to them like this on a PowerPoint, but it's also going to be presented in other ways in your content areas through maps and other visuals. Even though we don't consider the way that the syntax is arranged necessarily in all of our visuals, that can be very important because many times even the captions themselves are saying important details about whatever it is that our students are viewing or learning about. So if we just look at the etymology of the word syntax, the sin part of it means together, and tax means the arrangement. So it's the arrangement of how all the words are working together. That's what that means. Syntax is also valuable when we're considering semantics and the way these actually work together. So the arrangement of words in a phrase or a sentence is the syntax. We know that in the English language, we have some flexibility, but we have some basic orders that we use over and over again. Semantics, however, are the study of the meanings of morpheme. So this has more to do with the meanings of the words. Language structures support both the arrangement and the meaning of words, how we put them together. I want you to think about what this could potentially mean for our students whose second language is English, or whose dominant language spoken in their home is not English. So they're going to come typically with a different arrangement that is more natural for them. That can actually affect the way that they understand our content, what we're teaching. It can also affect sometimes the way that they present information. This is not just for students who have English as a second language. It can also be perhaps for students who are hard of hearing or maybe have some sort of hearing impairment. We know that their natural method of communication with sign language is not the natural English. They say a lot in just one gesture that it takes us many words to put together. Additionally, I want you to consider cultural backgrounds. So cultural backgrounds really influence the way that our students speak and communicate, and also the way that they're processing information. My very first school that I ever taught in was in Acadia Parish. And yep, there we go, Thomas. I guess that's a good thing, right?
I went to Iota High School.
Dude, that's my husband's. He's a Iota alumni. So, and look, I even got into the diphthong when I said it, Iota. I know how to say it the right way. Yes, yeah. And so my first school that I taught in, and you'll understand this, Thomas, it was Midland. So my first school that I taught in was Midland High. I was there for 2 years. And you know and understand that culture. That's a heavy Cajun. That's south of I-10. So that's heavy Cajun. And it took me quite a while to adjust. You know, I thought I was Cajun because I can make a roux, but I was nothing compared to that kind of Cajun. We literally were in the middle of rice fields. Well, I was 21 teaching my first class. I didn't look very different than the students, really. So I was really trying to do a lot to make myself look older and kind of make myself look like I had more authority. And I'll never forget my senior, one of my first seniors came up to me and he said, I'll go to the bathroom. Yeah. He was asking me. That little inflection at the end with the yeah, that was his version of a respectful request. But me, you know, I'm from Lake Charles. You didn't start with that sentence like that. That's not the way you asked a teacher. You know, you said, may I go to the restroom? Or at the very least, can I go to the restroom? You know, or can I go to the bathroom? But he put his sentence first, and that slight inflection with the yeah at the end was the request, and it was the respect that a senior, you know, was going to give me in that moment. But man, I remember I took that to heart. And I remember I went to my mentor who was right across the hall, and I was like, they're telling me they're going to the bathroom. They're not asking like they, you know, blah. And she went, wait a minute. And she helped me make sense of this and helped me reflect on some other things. These are all deeply ingrained in their culture, which has that French background. And it's the Cajun version. It's the Cajun version of our French. So it helped me understand how I needed to support them, because there were some grammatical patterns I noticed in the way that they presented their ideas, in the way that they wrote particular constructive responses, that it made their writing seem unacademic. And if I wouldn't have really been paying attention to what they were saying, and I would have just been so critical of how they were saying it, I would have missed a lot of the value in what they were really telling me about what they were learning. So I had to figure out some ways to support them in these areas, but also to make sure that I was meeting the needs that they had for content and recognizing the ways that they were already demonstrating their learning. So that's something that you want to think about, not only in the way we teach our content, but really knowing and understanding our students. The next part is literacy knowledge. So print concepts are so important. The message that's being delivered in the text. So for example, the way a menu is set up is going to be very, very different than the way a traditional book is set up. And we need to kind of figure out what types work best for our students. Which of our students may not understand the way that a particular text is set up. So for example, think about your content area. Maps have a very specific way that they have to be read. And you need to really understand the different parts of a map, the legend, the compass rose, if we're, talking about specific things, versus if we're in a music class, the way that sheet music is set up has a very unique and specific language, and that's going to be very different. I want you to think about the way that a fiction passage is set up versus a nonfiction passage. So I want you to think about, for example, this is probably a long time ago, but those of you who prep students for the ACT. So passage 1 in reading of ACT is always fiction. It has its own setup for the way we tell students to get in and out of that passage quickly. Those other 3 passages are nonfiction, and they are set up a completely different way. And we have to teach our students how those passages are set up, how the topic sentences function in the nonfiction passages are very different than the way you're going to have the setup for that fiction passage. So teaching them the print concepts and the patterns that emerge in our specific content areas is very important. It's a huge part of how they can be successful on much of their testing. Also, teaching them the difference between words, phrases, and sentences is also very important. That is going to influence their ability to communicate effectively in your domain. So when it comes time to do those written assignments, or when it comes time to do those oral presentations, they need a pretty good understanding of what it means to have a complete thought and convey that complete thought in your domain. So just reflect on that and consider, what does it take to be successful in my types of print? What does it look like, my text? So some specific things are genres. And of course, we know that English has traditional dramas, our English subject. But even within your own subject matter, there may be specific genres that have patterns associated with it. So for example, the genre, I'm just going to say it, of like geography has a different language and concept than American history. They are both technically social studies, but the language and the setup of those content areas, it's different, and we can't make assumptions about what our students are going to be coming to us with regarding those. Even within music, if we're teaching our students jazz, that's going to have different dynamics. And that's sometimes why they struggle, is because we get to break the rules a little bit in jazz. So jazz has different dynamics than, say, traditional symphonic band that they're going to be in. Lots of overlapping, lots of overlay, but there are slight differences. And when we help them understand the different vocabulary, the languages, and the patterns that are associated with the genres within our content areas, it's not a magic wand, but it's one more strand that we can put in place to strengthen the overall skilled reader. Okay. Verbal reasoning of course, is very important because this is where we're teaching our students to make connections, to draw conclusions. These are things that they're not going to be able to actually put their finger on in the text. They're going to get several different clues, and they have to use the clues that they're getting with their own prior knowledge, and then with that background knowledge that we built for them. This takes a lot of time, a lot of strategic planning to help our students make inferences and draw conclusions about what they've read. But again, it's another way that we are trying to put another strand in place to build the overall literacy strength and then their content knowledge as well. So just a quick recap of how we can do verbal reasoning. An inference, of course, is a conclusion that we draw from known facts or evidence. A lot of times what we have to do is, I call them think alouds. Sometimes a version of a think aloud is, we call it modeling. But I actually will use this symbol where I actually will do like this. And I tell my students, I'm opening my brain up to you for a moment. And I'm going to think out loud for you how I arrive at this answer. And so I will actually break a question down. So for example, using the little elementary example that just kind of helps you draw in conclusions, I would use this and I'd say, okay, I'm opening my brain right now. So in this picture, I've got lots of balloons. I also see that one of the characters, it says that the character wore a party hat. And then I also see that, I also read on page 3 where it shows that another character was wrapping her present. So I've got all of these clues together and I have to put it with my prior knowledge. What experience do I have where I would possibly have had balloons, a party hat, and a gift? Ah, they're going to a party. Okay, so I have to think to myself, where have I already read or seen a picture, or I've done something in the context where a party, oh, I remember. This is in chapter 1 where he talked about it's their 50th anniversary. Oh, okay, they're going to, like, I have to get that basic with my students. I have to pull my brain back and I have to show them. So if we're in social studies and we're trying to help them figure out how to decode a map, we've got to open our brains up and show them, how did I actually draw that inference? And this is where it takes a little bit of remembrance on your part. What was it like for you and a student in that content area? And you have to go back and think about, what was it like for me to learn this content? It's hard because now you've made a lot of this automatic. So we have to basically pull our brains back and use metacognition to show them how to draw the inference. The same thing with the metaphor. Your students may have trouble connecting the dots in your content, but if you can connect it to something in the real world that's analogous, that has some sort of comparison that they could understand, it will help them make that leap so much faster to be able to draw that inference that you need them to, or that conclusion that you need them to. So those are 2 quick ways to support it. We're going to quickly look at Blank's levels of questioning. There are lots of kind of questioning. I highly recommend that you find one that works for your content area. Ask a mentor. There might be some built into your curriculum. Ask your maybe your curriculum coach at your school. I'm going to show you a very basic one that's just used for literacy in general, but there are some that are much more strategic for your content areas. If you've never heard of like the 4 levels of questioning or the 3 levels of questioning, write a note and look those up. You might like it better. This one just supports literacy outcomes. It's called Blank's levels of questioning. And it was developed by a psychologist to support overall thinking. But we've kind of adopted it in the science of reading because it helps us understand text and consider what we're reading. So the questioning actually moves from simple questions, more like concrete questions, to more difficult abstract questions. And it encourages the development of general language skills. That's why it doesn't just support literacy in a traditional sense, but in a broad sense, overall content acquisition. So level 1 questions are called matching perception questions. These can be short, and they can even actually use like nonverbal signs. Like these are the kind of questions that we sometimes say, like, give me a thumbs up, give me a thumbs down, or if you think it's option 1, show me 1. Or so some examples are, what can you hear? What did you touch? What is this? What did you see, or what did you read here? These are kind of what we consider the identify or the basic recall questions, okay? They can be embedded in a lecture too, so it doesn't have to just be traditional text. The next is the selective analysis of perception. These questions are known, these questions detail of objects known to students, but are not necessarily visible. And so they might not be present on a PowerPoint, or they might not be present in the text, but we're actually using them to kind of categorize things. So these are the ones where we're asking them, what happened? A little bit of summary. Who, what, where? We're trying to get them to do a little bit of recall. This is where we might ask them to describe certain things, like certain features. So what were the features of the map? Or what were some of the features or the topography? What were the features of, this particular sheet music that we studied the other day, or the song? Then notice they actually get into a little bit of comparison. How was what we learned yesterday different than what we learned today? How was the concept of, for example, passive voice different than the features that we learned about active voice? So we're trying to get them to recall something previous, to build a schema about what did we learn today, to refine that understanding. The next level is reordering perception. So in this case, the answers require the listeners or the readers to use their knowledge, and that's where we begin to kick it into some higher order thinking. So now we're starting to ask them, what will happen next? So we did this in the experiment, and this happened. When we added this, this happened in the experiment. So now we know that the principles, if we look at the patterns, what can we kind of predict will happen next? Okay. We're also looking for, again, we're asking them to get in the role, the mindset of something. So assuming, for example, a perspective, if we're thinking about a political science. So let me just give you an example of one that I actually had the beauty of observing recently. So one of my residents was trying to teach the concept of isolationism. Isolationism. Students were struggling to understand the concept and the policy. One of the things she did, and I thought this was the neatest thing, is she gave them some examples around the room. She basically played 4 corners, and she said, who today do you think would be an isolationist? They would not want Americans to be involved very much in foreign policy. They would want us to be more domestic. And these are high school students. So she said, A, Kanye West. B, Taylor Swift. C, Donald Trump. D, I don't remember who D was. Well, they all went to their corners, of course. And while they were in their corners, they had to come up a list of the characteristics that they associated with this celebrity and how they associated it with isolationism. She was very quickly able to go around the room and she was able to see where their errors were, where they were having trouble understanding some of the distinctions. Also, she was able to understand their reasoning a lot better for it. So a lot of times when we can get our students to assume a perspective about what we're teaching, not only are we going to get them to really practice those good communication skills, but we're also going to be able to assess some areas that they have some gaps in their knowledge about what we're teaching them. So what ended up happening then is they begin to present their ideas. Well, slowly, they all begin going to a certain area in the room because as their understanding of isolationism was more refined, they began to understand why one of the figures was obviously the better figure for teaching isolationism, or who would have been an isolationist at the time. So it was kind of an interesting way to teach it, but it's something that I want you to consider when we get to the level 3 questioning. Just perspective alone and making those real world connections can strengthen that literacy strand for our students, that content acquisition strand. And then the last question is all about reasoning and perception. This is a lot of predicting, and this is where we are really getting them to support with evidence. So evidence from some text or some graphic. And we're also trying to get them to discuss alternatives. What are other ways of doing this? What precipitated this? So those sorts of things. This is just one brief way to use levels of questioning. I actually linked this full PDF. But again, this is a very broad, general type of questioning. Since we are all from different content areas, I thought this one would be the basic in general. But some final thoughts are that students do need explicit instruction and frequent practice with learning activities that allow them to strengthen this strand. In all of our content areas, we know that we have a certain curriculum. We kind of discussed this last time, that we're really trying to race through. And a lot of times I remember I felt like I was kind of like shoveling curriculum because it seemed like there was so much to cover and not enough time. So kind of be intentional, and kind of like what we talked about last time. There may be some parts of your curriculum that your students don't need as much practice with. And you could edit that out and maybe spend a little bit more time on some activities that allow them to practice their language structures, their literacy knowledge, and some specific strategies to strengthen their verbal reasoning. So as long as we are building in opportunities to practice these things, we always will support. And I'm going to show the picture one last time. We're going to support these strands. So if we could just take 1 minute to look at this picture again, most of us in secondary are typically, we're going to be focusing on these upper strands. Last time we talked about background knowledge and vocab, and this time we briefly covered language structures, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. So we're just building some understanding of what these strands are, so that when we start to discuss some specific strategies, we will know exactly how these strategies are supporting our students' learning. All right, so that takes care of our reading strands for this time. Again, just building up our bank of knowledge. Next class period, we're actually going to discuss a little bit more of strategic teacher moves we can make in addition to the ones we already covered. Before I move on, do we have any questions about that content or comments? Any thoughts about it? Okay, I'm going to jump into the second part of the lesson plan. For the sake of time for the lesson plan, I am not going to pull up the template or the resources. Those are all there for you. Please don't hesitate to look at those samples. So those are all there for you. But what I am going to do is pick up straight where we left off last time. And we were actually looking at this ELA sample we had stopped at looking at student misconceptions. I'm going to enlarge this a little bit for you. And if you will remember, this was a 9th grade ELA class. The teacher was giving a lesson that was based from the Odyssey. She knew that some of the misconceptions that her students were going to have was the readability of the text. She was really worried about, as she mentions here, she says that certain words and places are going to be unfamiliar to the students. This confusion is going to be overcome in part by using technology and other resources to define the unusual words. So she actually had them like do some synonyms and a little pre-work for it. She goes on to discuss some potential misconceptions that students could have. The most important part here, where it talks about student misconceptions, and I'm just going to give you a tip, the place that people miss points in this is they don't give a solution for it. They will point out really good misconceptions, but they don't, a lot of our residents don't actually tell what they're going to try to do to meet the learner's needs with the misconception. So when you're writing your lesson plan, make sure you don't just identify the misconception, but also have a plan in place to support it. The next area she goes down to is the lesson progression. I really appreciate the way that this resident organized this lesson plan. On the left-hand side, she put everything that she would be doing. And on the right-hand side, she put everything she expected and anticipated that the students would be doing. Notice that she put timestamps. Those are color-coded. Those directions are all built into the template. Her seed questions are, she color-coded those in green. And she labeled them with the depth of knowledge that those questions were. This is one way that we just talked about actually, those leveled questions. Go ahead and plan them out. Put them in your PowerPoints. Put sticky notes in your curriculum or write them in your curriculum. Have those questions ready to go so that you can support the students in the moment to get to some of those higher levels of critical thinking. So the lesson plan template forces you to do it, but it's just a good rule of practice to have those questions ready to go, especially until you become really familiar with your content in your subject area. So I do want you to notice here, though, that she did deviate from the template. One of the questions I often get is, do I have to go in that exact order that it's presented on the template? Like, for example, do I have to start with, you see where the progression is right here. Do I have to start with, I'm going to introduce and gain attention. I'm going to frame the relevance, but I was actually going to start with like a small group activity before I went to some whole class instruction. Yeah, that's completely fine. You can put these in any order that makes sense to support your learning outcomes. So you don't have to be rigid about going in this specific order. But I do want you to notice the sample. It gives very specific moves for what's going to happen in each part. These are the page numbers that I'm going to read. These are the line numbers that I'm expecting to read. This is what I expect the students to say at this point. These are some alternative answers they could possibly give. So she includes each part. If you do this, let me just tell you, if you take the time to really think out this lesson progression and this lesson plan, it is directly aligned to Danielson, and you are set up for success. Dr. DeVilliers, you're shaking your head. It is. I mean, this is in and out a successful lesson. I promise you will do well on your Danielson evaluation. It's tedious. We know that these are not the kind of lesson plans we develop every single day, but to be able to do this for at least one time for your courses and reflect on this, I know right now it seems very tedious to you, but I promise you, you're strengthening those skills to make those impromptu teacher moves moving forward. The next part of the lesson plan is the look, she goes into such detail with her progression. It's like beautiful. It really is. This is the best lesson progression I've ever received. And I'll tell you right now, this is a highly effective teacher in our district today. She graduated 2 years ago, and she's a teacher of the year this year. Yeah, she's a teacher of the year candidate. And you can tell she took a lot of time to be very intentional with her instruction. So as we go back, blah, 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 blah. Okay, next are going to be your resources. And this is where you're going to plan out everything that you've got to use for the lesson. Consider technology resources that you may need. And also, don't forget some of the things that we now take for granted. So, for example, all of us old fogies are so jealous of all the bells and whistles you guys have. Like everybody has a smart board, seems like now. We had to write grants and all this kind of stuff. So sometimes we take those things for granted, but you guys are using a really great instructional tool. When you're providing that visual resource for the students and you're actually being able to annotate on it, that's beautiful and fantastic if you have that. Any of your PowerPoints or your slide decks that you're using, I don't care where it came from. I don't care if you made it or somebody else made it. That's a great resource. Make sure you include that as in your resources. The next part are any technology standards that you're going to be hitting for your students. It's a way that we're trying to grow and we're trying to make sure we integrate technology. I do want you to notice that on the actual evaluation rubric, you will not be marked off if you don't use technology. So there are 3 components at the bottom of the rubric that are based on technology. Where we give feedback and we collect data, those don't impact your grade. However, in Danielson 2E, it says physical space and resources. In that part of it, it's very difficult to get a 3, which is an effective proficient. It's very difficult. If you have a technology item in the room and you're never using it and you're never incorporating it, it is considered many times a missed opportunity. So think about it. If I have a piece of technology in the room that would support my students' learning and I'm not using it, why not? Is that an area that I don't know how? It could be an area you haven't learned how to use it yet. And I am the queen of that. I know, I understand that. But it might be something that would actually make your job easier. So think about how we're using technology to support our students. I'm sure Dr. DeVilliers has a lot to say about that. And I'm sure he probably does regularly on the Thursday night sessions because he's a master at integrating. Next are considering how you're going to use your assessments, whole class, small group, individual, formative, summative, informal, formal. If
I
you
just
have,
want to make sure that everybody was paying attention. Brett, were you paying attention when she said master? Did you hear that? The master of integration.
yes.
I strive for mastery in all of my endeavors. So
Oh,
not going. That's not going to go unnoticed. I assure you.
I hear you, brother.
complacency is not our middle name. All right. So with assessments, again, this might be a conversation that you want to have with me on Thursday. Right now, you might be kind of trying to decide what's informal, what's formal, what's formative, what's summative. And you might be doing all of those things, and you might just need a little help identifying what you're already doing in your lesson plan. So I can easily help you kind of troubleshoot that on Thursday if you like. But don't miss an opportunity here to talk about some of the good assessment you might be doing in your class, even if it is informal. A lot of times just giving some sort of a quick question to gauge assessment, a thumbs up, a thumbs down, can be a way that we are assessing learners' needs in the moment. The next piece is differentiation. Everybody, hear me closely as we begin to close out our session. You do not have to do all 6 of these. Please nod your head that you understand me. Thank you. Some of my students sometimes kill themselves trying to do all 6: content, process, product, learner building readiness, etc. They kill themselves trying to come up with one for every one of those. You do not have to. A good rule of thumb is look at your lesson plan. There are some areas where you're already showing differentiation. Identify those areas here. Then go back and look, is there one more place that I could do it that maybe I'm not? That I could. Maybe I could, if I'm already verbally giving the lesson, could I also create a PowerPoint and guide students through to bump up that? If I am giving them the directions orally, but it really would be helpful if I put it on a little worksheet and I pass that out to the students, is that another way that I could differentiate? It sometimes can be just the smallest thing that we're trying to be purposeful there, but you do not have to do all 6. They're just presented to you so that you can see the different options you have, okay? The scaffolding throughout the lesson is simply how you're supporting students. For example, the challenge activity for the fast finishers versus the reinforcement activity for the students who are right at level versus the activity that actually might be a little bit of reteaching. I know that we strive to do that. I know that we strive to do that in the class period, but it's completely fine for you to identify ways to do it outside of the class period. So for example, we know that we all have RTI and fuel built in for the very purposes of supporting the students who are going to be tier 3, who are going to need that extra support. So it's perfectly fine for you to say that and build in an activity like that that's going to be done in RTI. Think about something you can do in the class, but it's okay if it takes place outside of class. And then now I don't think you guys even have this on your lesson plan anymore. The research-based part, it's not even there. So don't even worry about that part. That's the end of lesson planning. That's the complete end of the lesson plan. We did part 1, we did part 2. Next, let me pull up really quickly so that we can look at our schedule. Y'all probably know it better than I do. Yeah. So yes. This week you're working on your lesson plan, and then you are going to upload your lesson plan for peer review by Sunday, 11/12. And then please reply by Monday, 11/13. And your peer review actually counts as 1 hour of field experience, because you are going to be looking at the way that someone else approached lesson planning. This is a wonderful way to see multiple ways to do different parts of the lesson plan. If there's a part of the lesson plan where you're like, I have no idea how to do this, put it in there. It's a rough draft. Literally type in, I need feedback here. I don't know how to do this. I am going to look at how other people on the discussion board did it. So it's perfectly fine to do that. That's what this is for, to create a safe space for us to look at how other people are doing it and to give some feedback ourselves. You have a lot of great ideas that I know that you could share with your peers. So that kind of sets us up. And I'll see you guys Thursday. I will not be in class with you next Tuesday. I'm not going to be in town. I have a professional conference to attend, and my flight is actually during our class time. So I wasn't even going to try to navigate that. Dr. DeVilliers is going to fully handle class, and we'll send a Zoom or a Teams link that you will be using for that one. So we'll send that out in the email. We can even talk about it Thursday. All right. Any questions, you just come off and let us know. If you don't have any questions, have a wonderful evening. Go get some candy. And it's such cool weather. Go eat some soup or chili or gumbo or something like that. So I hope y'all have a great evening. I'm here. I'm hanging out if anybody has questions. And I look forward to seeing y'all Thursday.
Y'all have fun on Thursday. So you know I won't be there.
We will miss you. I was looking forward to hanging out with my Iona dude.
I can't believe you worked in Midland.
Oh, Mr. Briley was my first principal. You know who I'm talking about? Clyde Briley.
I don't.
Oh,
Did y'all
he
have
is-
school on Fridays at the time?
So I was the first year we did. My second year of teaching is when we went to the 4-day. And I'm a believer. After getting to do it, I'm a believer. It was very successful. I mean, they're still doing it.
Yep.
So-
The whole parish is 4 days now.
Yep.
They took off Mondays in Acadia.
Yeah, and they're actually using that model now to kind of build out for Allen, because kind of similar circumstances. And I know that Cameron Parish modeled theirs after the Midland model. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it seems to be successful. I would
Yeah.
I like that Acadia Parish takes off Mondays instead of Fridays. Because that kind of saves all the sports people and the band people from having to like stick around after school on Friday. And so
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thanks, Thomas.
you're
Did you have?
welcome.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I have just a quick question. I was out of town last week, and so I had all my stuff ready to shoot to you guys on Monday, and like my task 1, 2, and 3, and then I had my oldest daughter who's in education too. She came over, and we had a panic last night right before we were like she was helping me submit it, and I realized that the task 1 was not what I had done, and so.
Aw.
I was trying to like it was a panic, and I worked some in my class today, and I all of it. So it's not all in because I know we're supposed to put it all
Okay.
together. And so she was being so sweet, and she's a new mom too. So she's got a little bit. And so I tried to do extra in my class with my students and tried to bring it anyway. So you said that we could possibly ask questions on that Thursday. I just didn't want to get so many points off every day if it wasn't turned.
No, don't. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine.
Okay.
Bring what you've got Thursday.
Okay.
And we'll look at it. I'll look at it and kind of give you some tips on how to move forward. And then
Okay.
we'll take. I know that I'm not going to be able to grade them right away.
Okay.
Like I know that, and I'm hoping that maybe Dr. DeVilliers and I can carve out some time to kind of.
Okay.
I'll bring some samples, Dr. DeVilliers, and I'll show
Yep.
you how I
Okay.
grade. And we're going to calibrate anyway. So
Okay.
it's okay. Yeah,
All right. I appreciate that so much, guys.
absolutely. Have a good
See you
day.
Thursday.
See y'all
Yep.
Thursday. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.